So Tina Knowles is finally breaking her silence on the divorce and spilling the tea on what led to it all. And it looks like she completely holds Richard to blame for the crash of their marriage.
No matter who you are, what you've done, what you look like, what you have, you're a person, you're a human being. And when something strikes you like that, it takes the breath out of you. And
Tina finally spoke on the divorce after weeks of speculation in the media, and the secrets she revealed about their marriage are truly shocking because it looks like she has had regrets on the marriage from the very start. Did Richard really manipulate her into marrying him?
Lawson is shaking. Richard Lawson, Tina Knowles' husband, who is now about to be her ex-husband. Baby, a lot's been going on there, getting a divorce after 8 years of marriage.
So if you guys thought that Tina Knowles' divorce was going to be without a whole lot of drama, well, you thought wrong, because it's starting to look like we're going to be getting way more drama than we bargained for, because according to sources, Tina is now accusing Richard of love bombing her and manipulating her into the marriage. Now, there have been some pretty wild allegations, and we're going to break them all down because there is a lot to unpack here. Now, if you're wondering why Tina felt trapped in the marriage, it's because she felt like she didn't have a choice when it came to the marriage. Richard had been pursuing her relentlessly for a very long time before he finally wore her down and she agreed to marry him. And when I say a very long time, I mean that literally, because he had been pursuing her before Beyonce was even born, and he started putting the moves on her when she was pregnant with Beyonce, which was really wild because not only was she heavily pregnant, but she was also very much married to Matthew Knowles at the time. The ring on her finger didn't matter much to Richard because it was love at first sight for him, even though he was also married at that point. Crazy, right? And the tea thickens. So if you're wondering how they even met, well, Richard's younger sister Gwen was Tina's bestie back then. And when Tina went to visit Gwen one day, she ran into Richard, and that's how they met. Now, like I said, he didn't care that she was pregnant or that they were both married people. But Tina, of course, turned him down because, well, she was pregnant and they were both married to other people. But just because she turned him down doesn't mean that he was ready to take no for an answer, and he continued to badger her until he eventually wore her down and agreed to be friends with him. Talk about friend zoning. Well, they maintained their friendship for many years until they eventually started dating after her divorce from Matthew in 2011. But let's get back to that in a little bit. So Richard got divorced from his wife Denise in 1989, and he immediately pressured Tina to dump Matthew for him. He was aware of the challenges and struggles that Tina was facing in her marriage, and he tried to bank on that to get Tina to leave her marriage. And when I say challenges, I mean that literally, because there were rumors that Matthew had been cheating on her for most, if not all, their marriage. The rumors were that Matthew had had several affairs, but Tina chose to turn a blind eye Stevie to the BS because she wanted to save her marriage and also wanted her daughters to grow up with both parents. She was determined to stick beside Matthew through thick and thin, and she just kept rejecting Richard. But according to Beyonce's childhood vocal coach, David Brewer, things in the marriage became even more strained when Matthew turned to drugs. In his tell-all book, he wrote, "Turns out he had escalated to stronger drugs and even stranger behaviors. Rumor had it that coke had long since stopped satisfying his thirst and had turned to crack coke." Crack coke must be that new. But anyways, David claimed that it was this drug habit that eventually led Tina to start cheating on Matthew with nobody else other than Richard Lawson. David wrote, "I soon discovered that although unhappily married, Celestine was not suffering all by herself. Going over to the main house to retrieve my keyboard one afternoon, I happened upon Celestine kissing a man. I recognized him immediately. Richard Lawson, a famous actor." Wait, so Celestine is her real name? Okay, Tina. So it sounded like Tina was kind of sending mixed signals to Richard, and it kind of explained why he remained hung up on her for years. This means that Celestina allegedly was comfortable enough to have an affair, but she still wasn't willing to commit to him fully. This should have been the sign for him to just pick up himself and leave, but he was obsessed with Celestina. Now, eventually, it was this obsession that made Tina, or Celestine, Tina end the affair and focus on her marriage to Matthew. But this doesn't mean that Matthew chose to focus on her, because he never stopped cheating on her. His affairs grew more and more public, and at one point he stopped putting in effort to keep his affairs discreet, and everybody soon found out that he was cheating on Tina, which was very embarrassing. He eventually got a woman pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. This upset Tina so much that she filed for divorce from Matthew. According to reports, Richard saw this as another opportunity for him to get Tina, and he started putting moves on her overtime the moment he discovered that she had filed for divorce. But Tina was determined to make her marriage work, so she called off the divorce proceedings and tried to fix things with Matthew. But it turned out that Matthew was not as committed as she was, and he ended up getting another woman pregnant. Now this was the last straw for Tina Celestina, and she filed for divorce a second time, and this time she saw it through. The divorce was finalized in 2011, but again, Richard had kept pressuring her to give him a chance. At this point, he had been steadily pushing that pressure on her for about 30 years. Can y'all believe that? 30 years. It's insane. Allegedly, they had their affair at some time in the 90s, but it was so short-lived because Tina ended it. She realized that he was getting more and more obsessed with her. But just because things ended with Matthew doesn't mean that she was ready to jump into a relationship with Richard, especially since she was still salty over how dirty Matthew did her.
I hear that my ex-husband is getting married. Now, this is my family. My ex-husband is my family.
Yes, right.
So I'm just very, I don't want to get back into that at all. That's not what I want, but still, it still hurts a little bit, right? It still blows your ego.
It took Richard more than 2 years to browbeat her into a relationship, and at this point, she was already feeling bombed by him. It also didn't help that she believed that he kept emotionally blackmailing her by consistently getting her family involved in the relationship because he knew how much her family meant to her. For example, Richard had always claimed that Blue Ivy was the one who brought up the topic of him proposing to Tina, but a source claimed that Tina had always suspected that he made up this cute story because he knew that Tina would love it if he thought that Blue wanted them to be together. Now there's also the fact that Richard made sure to tell the world that he got Beyonce and Solange's permission to propose. He said, "I called her children and I asked for her hand in marriage from them. I thought that that was important because I knew that it didn't stand a chance unless they were on board. I was fortunate enough that they were completely on board and just over the top excited about it." He eventually convinced Celestina Tina to get herself married to him, but sources now claim that Tina allegedly had her doubts about the marriage. She eventually gave in to him because he allegedly made her feel like she owed it to him because he had been asking her out for 30 whole years. Then there's the fact that she feels a type of way about him not standing up for her when she got dragged on social media for supposedly being rude to him.
And I wanted, I prayed for the type of man I wanted, and I got pretty much that. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. But, he has a lot of the qualities. He has a lot of the qualities that I love, and we're having a really good time, and I'm enjoying it.
Now, according to Tina, she was misunderstood by fans, and Richard's facial expressions made it even worse for her. She got dragged for weeks, but Richard never said a word or anything to try to get people to lay off of her. She claims that this was just one of the many instances that made her see him differently. And that's when she started to realize that Richard had been love bombing her into a relationship that she had been running from for years, and that she couldn't trust him to protect her when it mattered. This was when she realized how bad her marriage was, and she realized that she was too old to be stuck in a marriage that no longer served her. Okay, Celestina. She also shaded him and the whole situation on Instagram, saying, "I am careful not to confuse excellence with perfection. Excellence I can reach for. Perfection is God's business." She also added this caption, "I came across this quote this morning. I could not agree more with Michael J. Fox. I believe any human being who thinks that they are perfect or someone else could be perfect is delusional. I believe that only God is perfect." So when she eventually filed for divorce, she stated irreconcilable differences, and she made it clear that she is done with Richard, and there is no turning back. Fans had some mixed reactions to her revelations, and they left comments saying, "I don't believe this at all. She comes across as a very dominating woman." A prime example of why some people should just be friends and nothing more. Never date someone who you feel I might as well, because it's a recipe for disaster. And, well, Richard got what he wanted. She was his dream it girl. When you make your selection solely based upon physical preferences, it normally doesn't end well. But I have to know what y'all think about Celestina Tina's situation. Do you think that Tina is telling the truth? Or do you think that she is just trying to push the blame on Richard? Drop your thoughts in comments below and then check out this next video.